The way I like to think about Prospera, and I describe it to policymakers because I do a lot of our policy work now, is exactly as I've described it to you here. Like, look, we know what works, guys. It's just you and I both know that for the U.S. example, right, Congress is dysfunctional. So because Congress can't do anything, here's another way, right? Let's do it at a zone level. Let's prove it works, and then expand it from there and use that as a template to pass the similar legislation nationwide. This stuff's not complicated. It is really simple. It is like good, clear rules, fair, impartial, and just enforcement of those rules, fair and impartial and rapid adjudication of disputes, right? At a high level, that is it. That we know what works. We know the formula for prosperity.
This episode of the Free Cities podcast is brought to you by Veritas Villages. Now, Veritas Villages are freedom-oriented, energy self-sufficient luxury communities designed for people who want to enjoy peace of mind and real freedom in today's unpredictable world. Join a community of like-minded neighbours who value privacy and independence in a place where you can use Bitcoin, including for the purchase of your property. www.veritasvillages.com/free cities for more info, and in the meantime, enjoy the conversation. I don't know whether you remember, actually. Do you remember, like I was saying, the first time we met was the first Prague conference. This must have been 3 years ago.
Yep.
And I made a film. I
remember that. Yep.
And you were great for sound bites, I remember, because when we used you at the very end of it.
I remember that, yeah.
I could probably remember what you said, but whatever you said was like perfect for the ending of the film. And it was like, I can't even remember. It was like if you would distill a soundbite down to its most perfect essence, it came out of your mouth.
Amazing.
So thank you for that, for starters. So you were at Prospera then as well. I think you're quite a long time Prosperian.
I was actually the first full-time employee legally. Now, this is a bit of a technical point because, the founder, CEO, Eric, was already working on the project, of course. There were a few other guys that were also working on the project, but they were not employees. They were early investors and board members, and they were just, giving their time basically to work on it. So I was the actual first, literal employee of this project specifically. So I've been around since 2017.
Wow. Actually, it's just reminded me, I've got to ask you about this thing because I've been asking everyone who's ever been connected with Prospera, and even Massimo, I asked him yesterday, but the other day, an article came out, which was on a site that I think is pretty cool, Whitney website. I don't know whether you know who she is. No, she's a cool independent journalist, millions of followers, whatever. But she syndicated an article. I'll read you the title. It was called "City States Without Limits," and it was basically a kind of conspiratorial thing that a powerful group of Silicon Valley oligarchs are basically pushing for the construction of privatized city-states aligned with, a global network, and they want to move away from nation states and stuff. And it's huge. I mean, it's a huge thing. I read through it. It's like one of those things that joins the dots between so many things. There was a lot about Peter Thiel. There was a lot about all the initial investors in Prospera. They got a lot of the Prospera stuff. It was a bit outdated. They talked a lot about the Crawfish Rock stuff, and about taking land and all that. I know. It was really annoying. But there was, like I say, I kind of respect the outlet that it was on. And I reached out to the guy, and he's not getting back to me. He must be seeing my messages, because I'm saying, look, come on the pod, dude. I'd like to talk about this. Not least because I think you've got a few things wrong, but I just want to know more about this. How do you join all these dots together? And, I've spoken to a few people about it. And when I said it to Massimo, he's like, well, yeah, it's kind of true, I suppose. They don't like the state. They have got a lot of money. They're not, But it was just the conspiratorial side of it, which I found a little bit disturbing. That there are people, because then there are a lot of incentives to create free cities.
Of course.
And what I'm worried is that in some future that we all end up in. Because I think you at Prospera, you've already gone through this a lot, the kind of in a neocolonialism kind of way, you're taking land, you're doing this. And there will be another one, I think, and it will be this. It will be tech billionaires who want to isolate themselves, who want to be, they all believe in a feudal system, and they want to do this, that, and the other, and blah blah blah. What do you think of that?
I think it's all very entertaining and funny because it is so diametrically opposed to like how things actually work and what actually happens that reading these, it occurs to me and feels like reading a fanfic about what we do. It's like, oh, cool. Somebody got really creative. Like, wow, this is a very entertaining. This would be a much more entertaining story than the reality that happened, which is just years of brutal grinding, basically. Of course, it goes without saying, but to just be clear, like all of the claims about, land being taken from anyone are just completely made up. In fact, Bloomberg wrote a piece, of course, a hit piece that claimed the same thing about a year ago or something. We sued them and won.
Did you sue them?
Yes, we sued them and got a retraction, won apology letter, whole 9 yards.
Right, good. There you go. I didn't hear that it was a retraction.
We didn't kind of push this too much for a couple of reasons, but we've gotten one from Bloomberg, and because of that, now we tell every outlet that reaches out to us with these kind of hit pieces that you will face the same fate if you parrot the same lies effectively. So I'm going to get to your specific point in a second, but this is a fun kind of small tangent, if you will, that I think people will find interesting. Here's how the process works of a lot of these hit pieces being written. And I'm not speaking to the specific post you're referencing because I haven't read it, but in general, a journalist always is, kind of ideologically opposed to what we do, more or less. And so by definition, they're coming at it, incredibly aggressively and negatively. And it's not from some good-hearted, let's hold, truth to power kind of thing. It is just an ideological kind of axe to grind, effectively. And what they'll do is they'll go read the other hit pieces that have been written about it. They then use those, Wikipedia does the same thing, they'll then use those as a basis for the claims in their article, right? So if they want to make a sensational claim for which they have no primary evidence, well, they can just point to another outlet that seems, superficially plausible, facially plausible, and then say, hey, these people said this, and then now it's part of their article. So this is how these things kind of get propagated over time. And then they do a great job of trying to find specific people that will occur to a lay reader as reputable. And also, this person hates what we do, so that they can get a just potent, negative quote, basically. Okay. And here's how we typically find out about these things. I'm going to read you as an example. I'll keep the outlet name away for now because hopefully they don't publish this, but I'll give you a perfect example of what this actually looks like. Okay. So there's an outlet writing a piece about Prospera right now, a mainstream outlet. And this is how the most recent communication from them. Okay. They said, hey, the piece will run toward the end of November. To add, I will include a criticism of Prospera from a respected academic that Prospera is, quote, a predatory project in a weak state. Do you have any comment? Thanks. I just read you verbatim the email from the journalist. I read you verbatim the email. So that's how that goes. I get we get one of these a month or so.
I wonder who the respected academic is. It sounds like a left winger, but
100%. It's probably there's just one academic who I have a real axe to grind against. Her name is Beth Geglia. She's a PhD, I think, anthropologist. She's written a couple times about Prospera. With some peer-reviewed articles that say very similar things. It's your normal kind of critical theory, left-wing, sociologist and anthropologist type screed, basically. But she has the PhD after the end of her name, so she's a reputable air quotes expert, right? She can.
Do they ever acknowledge the positives? Do they ever say, we think this, but if you're a free marketeer, if you believe in sort of free market economics, then it's easy to argue that this has a massive effect, and here are the reasons why, and actually here's the proof, which is,
So they don't ever include the proof, but here's what they will do, which also backfires spectacularly almost every time. They will instead say something along the lines of, this project is a special economic zone with, a lower regulatory burden and where people can do, experimental biotech innovation, things like that, which you and I read and like, oh, this sounds great. But they don't add, and that's bad. You're supposed to assume the bad is implied from the way they frame it in the article. So what happens is one of the largest, it was a couple of years ago, but one of the largest up to this year, single days of e-residency signups we ever had was when a giant hit piece was published against us. I think it was in the Financial Times, maybe, some mainstream publication, because they did this throughout the article, right? So it was clearly framed the way they wrote about it as it was supposed to be negative. But they don't ever actually add, and that's bad because X, and then explain. You're just supposed to assume it's bad. So people that think like we do, that understand how the world actually works, read this and they go, well, this sounds awesome. I need to learn more about this. This sounds amazing. So it actually, I don't mind when they do that. That's quite helpful, actually. No, it's just literally making up lies that are infuriating.
You've had some pretty good press recently. I think, what was the one, the YouTubers that came?
Yes Theory.
Yes, and they almost framed it as we came to sort of like, they came, or correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like they came with an agenda. And it was disproven.
Correct. No, they did.
Yeah.
They did. So we're much more open and kind of amenable to, alternative media like YouTubers like that. Because basically the only thing we ask them when they come is obviously like, you don't have to let us review your thing. Like, you have full journalistic integrity. All we ask is that you let us show you the actual proof. Like, let us show you around. Let us answer your hard questions, your more aggressive questions, the skepticism you have. But let's just be honest about it, and that's it. They came in just like that, which is we're totally fine with. We're an open book to those types because I know for a fact, given their prior history, they'll be fair. They'll tell the truth about whatever it is that they're kind of investigating and looking at. So those kind of alt media types we quite like. And getting back to your original point, it was just an aside. To be clear, I absolutely hate journalists. There's this fantastic book, okay, called The Journalist and the Murderer. It's a book about how a journalist was writing a long expose about a murderer, and the way the journalist lied to and mistreated and otherwise abused and kind of defrauded the murderer made people end up sympathizing more with the murderer than the journalist. The journalist came out looking like the bad person. And it has, I won't quote it here in full because it's too long, but it has the single best opening paragraph of all time. It's absolutely phenomenal. So everyone should go read that. It's called The Journalist and the Murderer. It's phenomenal. So to your original point, about this big Silicon Valley right-wing conspiracy. Look, in some sense, I wish there were some truth to that, because it would mean it would be much easier to raise capital, and we would have a lot more resources and connections and things we could do to kind of help the world and to grow faster, right? So the degree to which it's not true is like astonishing, because it's basically diametrically opposed to the truth. Without going into details, we've tried to get some of these people, Peter Thiel being a great example, to invest for years. Never could get them over the hump. Like, they weren't interested, or it was too politically risky, whatever. We finally, I jokingly say this with the round we've raised earlier this year, we finally made the hit pieces come true, because we finally actually got a very small investment, like emphasis on small, from Peter Thiel's family office, finally, directly. So we finally made some of the hit pieces true. But that should give you an inkling of what I mean. It's not like there's a group of Silicon Valley billionaires and kind of tech oligarchs who, I have a monthly catch-up call with, and I'm like, all right, what would you like me to do now, sir? If we do that, you'll give me another $100 million? Amazing, I'll go do that right away. Literally none of this is true.
I thought, in fact, in the article, he said the original money came from Peter Thiel.
No, that is hilarious. It's completely wrong.
Palantir, were they?
No, they had zero involvement whatsoever. I would love to talk to the Palantir founders. I'm sure they would love what we're up to. That's right. But no, that's my point. This is just the exact opposite of the truth in every conceivable way. What people misconstrue is that, and this wasn't the first, this was like the second or third round we raised when this happened. Patry Friedman, who's a good close ally and friend of mine, an ally of Prospera generally, he raised a venture capital fund, of which Peter Thiel was a contributing LP, right, into the VC fund. Patry's fund was meant to invest in projects like Prospera, right? Charter cities, free city projects, that sort of stuff. So, of course, we were the anchor investment for their fund. Like, we were the first big investment they made. So people then took that to say, oh, Peter Thiel's directly invested in and controlling this project. But at that point, we had never even talked to the guy. We tried. We had never even talked to the guy at all. So that's why I say when I read these, I'm like, oh, this is very entertaining fanfic. It is so hard to raise capital. It is so hard to get people to understand what we're trying to do and believe in the idea, to understand this concept, not of, neo-feudalism or neo-colonialism or whatever. It's like much simpler and in many ways more boring than that, which is partnering with existing host nations, not fighting against them like some others in the space or castigating them or whatever. Like, these people try their best given the incentive structures and institutional structures that they're faced with, okay? And we come to these people and say, look, your country, whether it's from the United States to Honduras, anywhere, and say, look, you're held back in a number of ways by your legal and regulatory environment, your institutional environment. We don't innovate on the layer of governance anymore. It's very hard to reform the things you need to reform at nation scale, if not impossible. Nearly impossible is what I always say, with Argentina being the proof point to get why it's nearly and not always, right? And so let's partner to create special jurisdictions where we work together to create a new legal, regulatory, and institutional environment that is much more amenable to entrepreneurship, innovation, and business, while still protecting the public interest, the public good, protecting against negative externalities, things like that. Like most people don't realize, right? In anywhere where we operate or are going to operate, right, where we're trying to pass enabling legislation, whatever, a key part of the enabling legislation everywhere is an oversight committee that has to approve and review the provisions of your charter or your governance system, things like that are always appointed by the government, right? That's why I say in partnership with host nations. It's quite the opposite. We work hand in glove with them effectively, because the objective is, right, create a center, a nucleus, a nexus of prosperity in the country, so that everyone else in that country can see, in Honduras, for example, right? They can see, oh, people in Honduras, Hondurans, can run a robotic construction factory. We can do this in Honduras. It's not like there's some inherent limitation of the people that live there in some way, shape, or form. It's the institutional environment. And the goal is to get them to realize, oh, I don't have to travel to the United States to make more money, to innovate, to do cool things that push the boundary and push humanity's technological frontier forward, right? And create prosperity for myself and my family. I can actually do this here because I can see people doing it there in my country right now. So it has massive spillover effects, but at a more foundational level, and this is hard to measure, so people don't talk about it as much, but I think it's super important. As I kind of grow older, I recognize the importance of culture more and more. It can have a profound cultural shift over time, right? Where people it shifts that belief from people don't do those kind of things here, wherever here may be, to, oh, well, I have visible physical proof that people do those kind of things here, that people like me do those kind of things here where I live. So it inspires these people to think bigger, to dream more. And then it creates a template that ideally over time, the rest of the country, the actual national government, can now deploy. And instead of them saying, hey, we have this idea for a thing we want to do, they can say, it's a much easier political argument, right? They can say, hey, it's working in our partnership with Prospera. Let's do it nationwide, whatever the case may be. Maybe they change it a little, whatever the policy is. But it ends up being an example for the rest of the country to follow. And we know this can work because that's what happened in China, right? So Shenzhen became the first special economic zone in 1979. And it grew massively. It has over 12 million people now. At the same time, the population grew from roughly 300,000 over 12 million. GDP per capita in real terms, inflation adjusted, grew from around $300 to right around $40,000. So at the same time, your denominator in that fraction is multiplying by several orders of magnitude. You also massively increase the numerator enough that the overall per capita number went up drastically in inflation adjusted terms. So China saw this working, right? And today, by the way, over 50% of China's exports come from their SEZs. All of their technological hubs and hubs of innovation are SEZs. There's 46 of them in the country. They're responsible for a vast majority of the economic activity and growth in the country. So we know for a fact this can work in an authoritarian regime, even that they see undeniably these principles work of good governance, because it's not complicated either. I said this yesterday, but just to reiterate, this stuff's not complicated. It is really simple. It is good, clear rules. Fair, impartial, and just enforcement of those rules, fair and impartial and rapid adjudication of disputes, right? At a high level, that is it. That we know what works. We know the formula for prosperity. One of my favorite economists, Douglas North, won the Nobel Prize for kind of pointing this out and inventing the field of institutional economics in the 1990s. We've known this for a while. It's just implementing it that's incredibly difficult. So the way I like to think about Prospera, and I describe it to policymakers because I do a lot of our policy work now, is exactly as I've described it to you here. Look, we know what works, guys. It's just you and I both know that for the U.S. example, right, Congress is dysfunctional. So because Congress can't do anything, here's another way, right? Let's do it at a zone level. Let's prove it works. And then expand it from there and use that as a template to pass the similar legislation nationwide. Nothing would make me happier, by the way, if we go somewhere, form a Prospera zone, right, running on the Prospera governance platform. It is wildly successful, drives economic growth, et cetera. And then the rest of the country just this wouldn't happen, but hypothetically, right? The rest of the country copy paste everything we did. Amazing. Complete, total victory. That would be, nothing would make me happier, because then now the whole country could prosper the same way our jurisdiction is, right? And now we have an incentive to innovate more and do better to continue to be able to grow faster than the rest of the country. So it's a dynamic process that incentivizes improvement. So it's a very long way of saying, none of these, rumors and allegations are even vaguely true. They're like the opposite of reality. I wish these billionaires were just handing me money for free. That'd be awesome. It's incredibly hard to raise money. And it's not like they have, interesting policy ideas or ideas for kind of the business model that we can implement or anything like that. I call this the myth of the helpful investor. Not to say anything bad. Some of our investors are genuinely helpful. I'm talking very specifically about these kind of Silicon Valley oligarch billionaire types. They're very hard to get to, and if you can at all, it's like a 20-minute meeting or something. So like none of this is true. It's like so the opposite of how this works that I'm not even mad when I read these. I'm just like, wow, I wish there was a grain of truth here even, because my job would be easier.
It's not that I was mad. It was that I feel like these guys are on my side. I connect the dots on a number of things. So that was what was annoying. It was like, come on, like I'm working amongst this thing, and I believe in a lot of the things you do. Whitney Webb's pretty good at, not that she wrote the article, but she did syndicate it. But she's done some excellent journalism on all kinds of corruption around the world and things like that. So. But yeah, I agree, especially talking about the SCZ version. I don't know whether you watched our film. Did you, Zones of Progress?
Oh yeah, of course. That was amazing.
I directed that, and during that process, I learned everything I needed to know about the process that that countries can go through. And, China, as you rightly point out, is by far the perfect example, because they couldn't roll out changes nationwide. You can't go from communism to a free market overnight. It would be absolute mayhem. So they used it as a sandbox, and it worked, as you can see. And I think Dubai now, or the Emirates kind of in general, are another good example, because they basically have become a kind of whole, the free zones have kind of just bled into the whole country.
That's right.
And that's the theory. And so the model works, and what you're doing at Prospera, obviously, is the next step. It's not rocket science when you look at it. I wish sometimes that people could see it. Actually, you just hit the nail on the head. It's not complicated at all. It's not, and I fell into that trap myself, to think that there was something complicated about this at all. It's not. It's really people flocking towards freedom, economic freedom, physical freedom, whatever. They're flocking to a place where they can get done what they want to get done, and they're not, Frankenstein technology. And this is the other thing I think that people really misunderstand about Prospera, is that you can't just do anything there. It's like it's if you don't dig under the surface, you think, what, you can make your own legislation? Well, what the fuck does that mean? So I can just do anything I want? No, you've got to prove to an insurer that whatever you're doing is insurable. So you're beholden to insurers. It's like, in many ways worse than governments, possibly. I don't know.
No, that's exactly right. So 2 points here. The first is there's actually a filtering step, if you will, before you even get to the insurance companies, right? Which is in the Prospera governance system. You have to first, if you're proposing a new regulatory framework, you have to propose that to the Prospera Council, which then has a charter-bound duty to review this, ensure that it is better than, like the bar to clear, is that it is better than any other available option that you could have otherwise picked, right? So first of all, that's a high bar to clear.
Sorry to butt in, but what if it's something really complicated? Because you must get a lot of experimental industries and stuff in there that probably are pushing the boundaries of all kinds of regulation, right?
Totally. So we've had some proposals, like a few that have gone through, are both in the medical space as well as in the finance space, both of which incredibly complex fields, right? You need specific subject matter expertise. So in the finance world, for example, at the time when that proposal was being reviewed, we had that particular regulatory framework reviewed by, among other people, and kind of commented on and altered, actually, by Chirag Shah, who was the chief strategy officer and one of the kind of early executives and founders of the Dubai International Financial Center. So he's done this exact thing very successfully elsewhere. At the time, and one of the executive directors of the FDIC in the United States was doing this for us as well, reviewing these things. We'll bring in other words, very specific subject matter expertise on the things. On the medical side of the ledger, we have a PhD in molecular biology and related fields who will review these things that work in the kind of policy space. And that's after it gets the kind of first pass from, me and Nick Geranius and the rest of the council, all of which, in our own right, have worked in public policy. That's what I've done, my whole life, basically, even before Prospera. So we all have some, knowledge and expertise there. And then when needed, if it's beyond the specific subject matter expertise of the council, we bring in third-party people. Because again, everything always comes back to incentives for me to some extent, because people just like, again, this isn't complicated, and people think they're I don't think have the right mental models for this. Imagine the hypothetical world where you propose a regulatory system, okay, for the medical industry, let's say. I'm going to make up a wild example, okay, that allows you to make genetic chimeras. So a genetic chimera would be like a human-dog hybrid. They splice the two together and see what happens, something like that. Just an abomination, okay? And then imagine for a second that somehow, some way, this actually gets past the council. It never happened, but like, just bear with me. Imagine it does. We've just nuked our business from orbit. Like, we're done. We'll be bankrupt in 6 months or less, because it's all everyone's going to talk about. Hey, those crazy guys are doing the crazy stuff we told you they were going to do. This is going to cause actual harm in a number of ways, because this can be the source of a bunch of completely novel biological warfare type problems, novel like bacteria, viruses, et cetera. It can introduce a bunch of like existential risk to humanity, actually, right? So we have an incentive from a pure business perspective. We want to stay in business and become profitable. Then the first thing you have to do is make sure your legal and regulatory environment is not insane, because anyone's going to look at that and say, oh, I'm not coming. I'm not going there. Look at these crazy articles about these crazy guys. And in fact, I don't even want to be associated with that. Even if I'm in a normal industry, I'm not even in the medical industry. I don't want to tell my investors and potential business partners, hey, don't Google the place I'm at, please. It's fine. I promise. Like that's not a workable business model.
Trust me, bro.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a workable business model. So the incentives are what matter more than anything else.
So there's a panel that it goes through, and then it goes to the insurers, who presumably do their own due diligence on it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They don't take for granted what you've decided. They then, right.
Exactly. Because they can just refuse to provide the insurance. They can just say, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't care if it passed the council or not. I'm not going to do that.
Can you give me an example of one that has passed recently that was quite innovative?
Yes. So we call it kind of informally the mini circle regulatory system, because they were the ones that proposed it. This was a couple of years ago when Minicircle first started operating, but that's probably...
What is Minicircle? I don't know.
So Minicircle is a gene therapy company based in Prospera. Yeah. This is another funny tie-in to our earlier conversation about Peter Thiel. They had received direct investment from Peter Thiel in their seed round, not us, them. And they are working on like longevity gene therapies. They're applying this gene circle technology, basically.
I don't know what that is.
Long story short, and I'm about to tell you the limit of my knowledge here, so if you ask me any more detail, I don't know. But my understanding of how it works is it's a fairly well-proven and reversible vector through which to do targeted gene modification on specific proteins and cells in the body, basically, and it's reversible critically. You can back it out, basically. You can inject an enzyme afterward that dissolves the mini circle, and therefore it's gone. There's no long-term effect. It's not doing what's called a germline gene edit, right? You can't do that in Prospera at all, actually, because it has like existential risks. A germline gene edit, okay, it means you're editing the actual like all somatic cells in the body, and you're editing the genetic information that would be passed down to a child, right? It's the actual like full genetic lineage, basically. There's a different kind of gene modification you can do that temporarily modifies somatic cells to change the expression of a particular thing for a particular duration of time before that cell eventually replicates. And when it replicates, then it replicates back to normal state, basically, okay? That's what they do. It's a reversible, temporary change. So if you like wanted to keep using their therapy indefinitely, you would have to get another treatment of it every like 90 days, I think it is, or 120 days. So it's a cool kind of therapy, and they proposed a novel regulatory system for this type of thing that basically, in a nutshell, and I'm oversimplifying here, but this we'll get the gist of it. As long as you've gone through phase 1 equivalent trials. So in the U.S., the FDA system, you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is safety. So phase 1 is where you're testing to see will this harm people? Does it cause any sort of adverse reaction? Maybe theoretically, and from the kind of, etiology and pharmacokinetics of the drug, it's not going to do anything, but you never know until you give it to people. The body's complicated. So it has to have gone through that process of proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that we know for certain that it's not going to harm people, right? There's not a bunch of negative adverse events. After that, then, okay, normally in the FDA process, then you go through further efficacy trials, which is phase 2, and then phase 3 are efficacy as well as proving that it treats the specific disease you're trying to treat within the FDA framework better than other alternatives. So it's a crash course on the FDA works. So this mini-circle regulatory system basically says you've gone through phase 1, then you can go to market so long as you have very, very clear free prior informed consent including all of the possible tail risks, the list of kind of warnings you get when you buy some products in the U.S., that type of thing, that it's very clear that you understand it, that you've reviewed it, that you're actually cognizant of what it is that you're doing. But at a very basic level, at that point, then consenting adults should be able to do what they like, right? So long as it's cleared this very basic bar of safety. Because this would be a negative externality we could create, right? If you have advanced treatments that your average customer that might be interested in buying these things doesn't understand, it's too complicated, they're not a doctor, whatever. That's why having this bar to clear is very important, to make sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's no tomfoolery happening there. But beyond that, consenting adults should be able to consent to do things together, so long as they are fully informed of what it is they're agreeing to do. So that, in a nutshell, right, is how the kind of mini-circle regulatory proposal works. There's some other provisions. That's the meat of it.
That whole consenting adults being able to take, experimental drugs, that's quite a large part of Prospera's advantage, right, isn't it? I think I seem to have spoken to a number of people who, and it makes total sense to me. Yes, of course. Of course I should be able to try a drug if I want to. Why would I not? But so you get that quite a lot, do you?
That's exactly right. And it's not just that. It manifests in a few other ways. This is actually referred to in U.S. policy spaces as right to try, right? Montana passed similar legislation actually in the last year. An L2 partner of ours, Infinita, my good friend Nicholas over there was instrumental in making that happen. New Hampshire has passed something similar and is considering expanding it further. So it's basically similar to what we do. But there's another piece of it where we go a little bit further. That also is one of those things, like when you hear it, it's like, why doesn't everyone do this? Which is just reciprocity. Right now, let's say you're in the United States and there's a drug that has gone through the full gamut of FDA equivalent in Australia, let's say, but it hasn't gone through in the U.S., doesn't matter. Can't take it, can't use it. That company, even though they've proven safety, efficacy, treatment, validity for the disease state, et cetera, in other countries, they have to go through the whole multi-billion-dollar process, decade-long process in the U.S. again to sell the drug in the U.S. So another simple change we made is, look, if this drug is approved in a reputable country, so one of the OECD countries effectively, or another country that has a robust, provably robust, pharmaceutical review system, then you can use it and sell it in Prospera, so long as you can prove to us that it has gone through this full, robust approval process in some other country, just automatic reciprocity, effectively. That also is a huge unlock, because there's a bunch of efficacious, treatments and pharmaceuticals and kind of enhancement compounds and protocols that are legal and have been reviewed and have been taken by tens of thousands of patients elsewhere, but you just can't do them in every other country except that one specific country, because no one has this reciprocity. So it's not just the right to try if it's gone through safety trials, it's also reciprocity if it's gone through the full trial gamut in a country that's high income enough to have a reputable drug review system.
And in those cases, how much of the responsibility lays upon the head of the person taking the drug to also do their due diligence on it? For example, say it was I don't know, this is a silly example, but say it was a North Korean drug and it was allowed. How much wiggle room is there for you to not tell them it's from North Korea and they take it and then die and then they sue you or whatever?
There's basically no wiggle room there. So there's a couple layers that prevent that from happening. The first is that particular treatment protocol would never be approved to be done in the jurisdiction in the first place by the insurance companies or when they got their regulatory approval. Because a part of this regulated industry insurance system is you have to say, here's what I intend to do. Here's the safety and efficacy data on it, et cetera. So it would never make it through that initial insurance review process. Both from kind of the Prospera side of things as well as any insurance company that's doing this. So there's just layer one there that your experimental North Korean drug would just never make it to market in the first place. So there is a layer of not expecting every consumer to become an expert on etiology to be able to do these things. But beyond that, after that, you have the same duty as you would in the U.S. or elsewhere, right? Where in the U.S. there's pharmaceutical companies market straight to the consumer. People go to their doctor and request the drug basically, and so long as it's FDA approved, they just go for it, even though they have no idea what the profound effects could be, positive or negative. SSRIs are my favorite kind of example of this. The doctors and others don't talk about the profound negative side effects those can have over a very long time horizon. because they're FDA approved. So they're like, oh, whatever, it's fine. And so there is always, in any market, some duty on the consumer to not just completely go in blind to things. And the second layer of protection you have in Prospera is that informed consent piece, right? You do have to demonstrate, like provably, that you've provided to the patient a detailed overview of like what the thing does, the potential risks, side effects, et cetera, and that they've signed this if you're using one of these more experimental treatments that has been approved elsewhere and has made it through phase 1. So it's a dual layer system. But at the end of the day, there's no escaping that in any market. Like at the end of the day, there's no regulatory system on earth that would work that stops stupid people from harming themselves. I'll put it that way.
So when people, like I've bumped into a few people around the world who said that, I went to Prospera for a gene therapy, for example. Are those people using Prospera because it's too far to fly to Australia to get the same thing on the whole then? Is that the more common reason why these kind of things are happening in Prospera than just some completely brand new regulation or whatever?
It's actually more of a new treatment that happens more often because there's a lot of things that we have strong theoretical and experimental trial evidence that they will work, but they haven't made it through the full FDA process yet, and they haven't been approved elsewhere either. Because oftentimes, right, just like in a very kind of nuts and bolts way, these medical innovations come from the U.S., Stanford, MIT, whatever, or former, students there. So it often starts in the U.S. And then these people don't want to go to Australia, Europe, wherever to start their process. If for no other reason than the U.S. is the largest medical market in the world by like an order of magnitude. We spend more on healthcare than anywhere else. Our per capita healthcare spending is higher than most countries' national GDP per capita. Literally, it's not an exaggeration. It's absurd. So because of that, like you want to be in the U.S. market. So that's usually the focus. And then because of that, the novel innovations also come out of the U.S. So it might not have been passed elsewhere. It might not be approved elsewhere, but it's made it through phase 1 trials in the U.S. or in another jurisdiction, but it's been through phase 1 trials somewhere. And then it's not gone through the process elsewhere. So it's literally not for sale anywhere else yet. Like you could not access it anywhere else yet. But you can in Prospera. And the gene therapies people come to get, which are often this mini-circle treatment, actually is the most popular by far, this follistatin treatment, is a just textbook example of exactly what I'm describing. You can't go anywhere else literally in the world to get that right now because we know it's safe. The particular underlying like technology, that mini-circle and the follistatin treatment have been used in other like forms and use cases, but not in this particular way. But we know like the actual underlying mechanisms of action are safe and the kind of drug interactions are safe. It's just that this specific thing has not been approved yet. And some of them they can't be, by the way, because the FDA doesn't right now have a robust enough process for approving gene therapies. Like one of my favorite examples of this, we technically have the technology, like as a species right now, to have what are called individualized gene therapy treatments, right? So this would be where, I scan your genome and I say, hey, based on your genome, we could give you this gene therapy that would reduce your risk of Alzheimer's by 50% or whatever in old age. That would require for just you in an N=1 situation, going through the full FDA approval process. The full thing, the multi-billion-dollar decade thing. So, of course, there's a whole class of technologies here that are just locked behind that wall, basically. So there's a bunch of ideas that are known kind of in the latent space or in the medical space that nobody's even working on or trying because it's like, it's not even possible. There's no path to market there. You can't do it. Like anywhere, because another unfortunate consequence of the U.S. being the de facto global hegemon is that this has a lot of positive benefits, to be clear, but one downside is the rest of the world also often just copies our regulatory systems or models theirs after ours, at least, even if they change it some. So because of that, FDA doesn't do it. People see the FDA as kind of the leader in the space. And to be clear, that in and of itself is rational, right? Because we spend more money on this than anyone else. We have the largest like drug regulatory system in the world. So stands to reason, like the U.S. is spending the most money on this. They have the smartest people working on it. If their system works, it'll probably work for us, right? But an unintended consequence of that is if the U.S. doesn't let you do it, odds are basically every other country also won't let you do it. It's another reason these type of zones are so sorely needed, right? Is we need an outlet for these technologies in a responsible way, as I've described, proving they're safe first, they're not going to harm you, to actually see what these things do and to push the technological frontier. Like I want to live in a world where I can go get individualized gene therapy, right? To treat, I've had 7 knee surgeries because I have genetically, I just have really bad cartilage in my knees. The technology exists, theoretically, for me to fix that specifically. If I could have an individuated gene therapy that causes my body to grow higher collagen cartilage, basically. doesn't exist anywhere in the world because of this just massive regulatory wall, basically. There's not even a regulatory wall. It just doesn't exist. It's not like, oh, the process is hard. Like, that would be a problem. That's a solvable problem. It's that there is no process.
Well, I was just thinking about all this stuff, and it's such a catch-22 situation. Being at the sharp end of the wedge is literally, even I think gene therapy. I just think Frankenstein. I think it's like you've got such a PR quagmire doing what you're doing. If you think about it in every single shape and form, it's so easy to attack a ZA. It's so easy. It's all these things. All these things are so easy to jump to the conclusion of. And I'm fully on board, and I still think this.
Oh yeah.
I still think that I can still imagine these things. It's crazy. I know. I mean, I would say as well. I'm thankful for especially Prospera, because you are taking on all these head on. You are literally the sandbox where all these things are playing out. And in the grand scheme of things, I'd say this is why I feel so bullish at the moment on everything, is a hardline socialist government has stepped up to you and said, we're going to shut you down, and then not acted on it. That's amazing. When you think about it, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, I don't know what your view on the current situation is there, but from an outsider looking in, I've heard them say the law is now illegal, is rescinded, we're going to shut you down, and then nothing happened. And nothing is happening. And now I hear different rhetoric. I hear the rhetoric of, well, we did well. There's no we're going to shut you down. It's like, yeah, we did well. And it's like, why? Well, there's going to be no more ZAs. It's like, yeah, well, what about the ones that you're going to shut down? There's going to be no more. Is that true? Is that kind of what's happening?
More or less. I have to be careful here because of the arbitration case we have, of course, so I can't go into a ton of detail. But speaking to, what's been, publicly published by the Honduran Supreme Court and otherwise, the reason we're kind of seeing what you're describing is that the kind of legal foundations of Prospera and of the ZA system writ large are so strong that there was just, without a supermajority of Congress, basically, which they have never had at any point, there's literally no way for them to do what they want to do, or what they've at least claimed they wanted to do on the campaign trail, right? To actually literally stop us from operating, run us out of the country, et cetera, because of, international treaties, the actual constitutional amendments, all of it. There was no way, with the way kind of Honduran law and constitutional law works in a nutshell, for them to do this in a way that is not extrajudicial, arbitrary, et cetera, which is obviously how the international arbitration case came about, right? They attempted to do this in a number of ways, including with the Supreme Court ruling, in direct violation of several international treaties and their own constitution in a number of ways. And so as a result of that, we have the arbitration case going. But all I'll say on that, to be clear, is that, it's not like the goal here is not to win lawsuits, right? The goal here is to catalyze prosperity, full stop. So we are hopeful and optimistic that, in the near term, call it, the next year or two, somewhere in there, that this situation will be resolved amicably, and we'll be able to move forward, working it hand in hand and in partnership with the Honduran government again.
But even the lawsuit is a PR nightmare. I understand. When you hear, I think the way it was spun was that you're suing, oligarchs are suing the Honduran people, not the government, for more than the GDP of Honduras. And that it's kind of I don't know whether it's true, but the essence of it is true. But that was the point. You have to, what do you want to do? Not do that. The rules say, and they're hard for a reason. The rules are that if they renege on their deal, this is what we want to do, because we've got to stop them. Otherwise, why would we start this thing?
Exactly.
But to spin it in the other way is so easy. It's and it's not like it's easy to unspin it either.
That's what I was about to say. So what frustrates me the most about this, and this is not speaking specifically to the arbitration case, this is just in general the hit pieces about Prospera and the narratives you're talking about. It is so easy to quite literally lie, mislead, misdirect, selectively kind of misinterpret intentionally and maliciously kind of what we do, who we are, what's going on. And it is so much harder, right, to undo. There's some term for this, I can't remember, that applies not just to us but broadly, right?
Which happens in trading. It's like climbing the stairs and coming down the elevator.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Or is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Coming down the elevator, climbing up the stairs.
That's exactly right. Like to put it in kind of a tweet length, right? It takes one sentence to make a completely sensational, viral, totally false claim. And then it takes a couple paragraphs to explain, no, here's how the law actually works. And people see that and they're like, they see the original tweet. They're not going to see the response we do immediately after, explaining in great detail why that's like false in multiple different ways, whatever the sentence may be.
I never heard that Bloomberg retraction, for example.
It's infuriating.
I stopped, but I read these things now because I want to see. It's a good gauge. You can gauge public opinion, and because if that changes, if the Bloomberg pieces start changing, that's a really good sign, But other than that, I don't. There's no point reading them, is there?
That's exactly right. That's why I hadn't read the one you're talking about. Like at this point,
you won't have read this one. No, absolutely. This is kind of fringe.
Yeah.
But I would. The only reason it was a little bit annoying is because I think it's not like some left-wing publication lying. Although what the guy didn't realise was the stuff he was saying about Prospera was coming straight out of the left-wing newspapers in Honduras.
Exactly.
And a few, But when I look at him, he's not that way inclined. They're truth seekers, And there wasn't much, but the narrative was just too juicy. That's the problem. The narrative of, there's a rich guy trying to. I mean, despite the fact, of course, I've asked, because I'm interviewing a lot of people here connected with, ZAs, I've asked everyone this because I was interested to see what their answers were. And I've had an interesting answer. Yours has definitely been the most balanced. But a lot of people have said, yeah, so what? Literally. Well, but in a way, it's true because what the people that write articles like that probably don't acknowledge is that their default setting is that the state should be able to tell them what to do.
Correct.
Whereas we are challenging that, literally. And if you don't know that, because I didn't for many years, through never even thinking about that, my default setting was not really a default setting. It was like a bit of a scam, really. And so there's a lot of truth to the yes, so what?
Yeah.
If I had $1 billion, what would I do? Yeah, I might build a free city actually, and make sure that I'm kind of in control of it because I would like it to go the way I want it to go. Just like bought a house and I live in it, I don't let other people tell me what to do in my house. So it's a funny one, but you can't win. All you can do is just keep building, or you just keep doing your thing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You just have to just prove incontrovertibly and in a way that is even impossible to lie about that this does what we say it does. This unleashes innovation. This unleashes entrepreneurship. This creates prosperity, both for local populations and for the entrepreneurs and innovators that move into the space. That's all you can do, really, because the again, as I described earlier, the daisy chain of these guys, publication A makes a false claim, publication B references publication A in theirs, and then that continues for the next 24 letters of the alphabet, basically. And then suddenly what happens is, from a lay perspective, you're just, as a person just coming into it for the first time, don't know how journalism works or how the kind of modern, mainstream media that has an agenda works. Then you just go read a few articles, you're like, oh, they all say the same thing. Well, that must be true because they all say it, not realizing that literally all of them are lying. It is directly false. And what they do is they're very clever about this, right? So by attributing it to another source, they can facially claim they're not lying. Oh, well, this other guy said it. I'm just saying that he said it. That's all. Knowing full well the perception that they are attempting to cultivate, obviously. So this is how the media often intentionally misleads to craft an agenda. They do. Scott Alexander at Astral Codex 10 has a fantastic write-up on this about exactly how this works. He's been the victim of this before, so he wrote about the experience of what that's like. And they are very studious about avoiding making very specific, concrete claims worded in a way that you can immediately say that specific thing is blatantly false. They do it in such a way that they have at least a layer of facially plausible, deniability, superficially plausible deniability, right? So other publications said it, right? I'm just quoting them. I didn't say it. It doesn't matter that, you're a journalist and you should have journalistic integrity and actually look into the underlying, facts of the case. So then this kind of daisy chains along multiple publications, and you end up with this just general perception that because the lay public, unfortunately, although this is changing, thank goodness, but rapidly too. But people still trust a lot of these publications, right? Like, oh, they're journal. Like, at the end of the day, they can't. It can't be that untrue. Like, there must be, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Even if there's some sort of they're exaggerating it, there must be some sort of truth to this. And the idea that there's not, that these people just have a genuine, specific, kind of decentralized and emergent agenda against this type of project and kind of what we do is is a novel concept to them because and it's also, I feel bad for kind of people that haven't studied kind of how the media works and had to go. The reason it is because we've been through it firsthand, is because if you accepting the kind of the truth of how it works means you also have to accept two things. One, these publications I thought I could trust, I can't trust anymore. So now what do I do? Which means now the onus is on you to figure out what's true and what's not. And in 2025 with social media, that could not be harder, right? This is why I am a fan of kind of the Brian Armstrong, Balaji methodology of going direct, like just talk to the people directly, publish the truth, the videos, the pictures, whatever, the statistics about what you're doing directly, and just ignore the media. They will be irrelevant at some point because now you can just talk to your audience, right? The function the media used to have, the leverage they used to have over people, and this is waning rapidly, was that, you want to talk to the world? You have to go through me, right? Which means they get to set the perception and the agenda. But now, thanks to the internet, you can just talk to people directly. You don't need the middleman, right? That is a transformative change. But getting that cultural shift for people to go from, I can just default trust Bloomberg because it's Bloomberg, to I should default mistrust anything these people say until proven otherwise, basically, is a very hard shift. There's one last point on this. There's a term for this called Gell-Mann amnesia, okay? So this is this phenomena that a lot of people have experienced where you read the news, you read the newspaper or whatever, some media outlet, on things you don't know anything about. And you're like, just assume it's true. Like that's your just default assumption. There's, there must be some journalistic integrity, assume it's true. And then you go read an article that you happen to be involved in or just know the subject matter well. You're not even involved in it, but it's an article about the 3I Atlas comet and you're an astrophysicist, right? And normally you read all the business stuff and you believe it because you don't know anything about these businesses. You're not involved, so it must be true. But then you read the astrophysics piece on this comet and you're like, that's obviously not true. No, there's no extra gravitational acceleration. You're just making this, you're understanding it so poorly, I don't even know how you messed this up this bad. And then you flip the page and read an article about Prospera, whatever. Oh, this must be true. So that's why it's called Gell-Mann amnesia. Like you flip the page and forget. Oh, wait, hold on.
Do you forget?
There's one. This happens to a lot of people.
Oh, I thought people didn't forget.
I wish that was the case, but you'd be amazed how often this happens, where people will read a thing they know a lot about, realize it's entirely fake, and then not make the completely correct logical deduction from that, everything they write must be like this. They just think, oh, this is a one-off. Like, my area is complicated, whatever, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And they just keep on keeping on. It's infuriating. It's called Gell-Mann amnesia.
If you, I think that mode of journalism is always almost reaching its final form. When you follow it to the end, you get articles with quote tweets in them by just who knows who. So-and-so said this, and you think that's a retarded thing to say. Mm-hmm. It's like, but it doesn't matter. It's like somebody said it, and it backs up the article that we're saying. And it's like, that happens a lot.
Oh, and it will be, I've seen a few of these that are like very funny. These are not about Prospera, but just about other things I know about, where they will have exactly what you're describing. The article is based on like 4 or 5 quote tweets or screenshots of a tweet. And then I go look up the actual tweet on x.com, and it has like 50 views. Like you just found a random person, literally, it's often an anonymous account too. You found a random anonymous account that said the thing that advances the narrative you would like to advance, and then you publish that as if this is a credible source. What? It's insane. That is genuinely insane behavior.
You said earlier that you think that a good strategy was to ignore the media because they're going to be irrelevant anyway. I would push back on that because I think when I look at Prospera's kind of trajectory, I think in the earlier days, I think you got hammered, and I didn't see a lot of pushback, actually.
I totally agree.
Oh, you agree?
I actually totally agree. Yeah, this is a shift we've made, in the last couple of years, basically. So we have 2 different strategies now. So we don't ignore them. So like that hit piece, I read you the email from the journalist from yesterday. That one, obviously, our media team and our comms team responded with, fire and brimstone, basically, as you should. It's like, that's a just completely insane thing to even ask me. And here's the truth of what's going on in Prospera. So we at least, cover our bases there so that the article doesn't read, we asked Prospera for comment on this claim that they are a predatory narco state or whatever it said. And they had no comment.
Yeah, they refused to comment.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So now at a bare minimum, they at least are forced to say something from what we said. Although, this is a sidebar, but even that can be dangerous sometimes because a couple years ago, I did an interview with the MIT Technology Review, who for some insane reason was writing about Prospera, which, to start off with, why? You should be covering the cool tech MIT and other people are building, but whatever. Did the interview. I recorded it, the whole thing. I told the journalist I was doing this, recorded the whole thing, so that I would have proof if I was misquoted or something, thinking this is just like an insurance policy. I won't need it. She was, very nice journalist, very cordial on the call, seemed friendly, publishes the piece. And one of the quotes that made me sound terrible. We forced them to change this immediately because we threatened to sue them, and because we could prove it. She literally had taken a couple sentence response I had, and then she cut it in such a way that it read completely differently from how I said it by removing selectively parts of my response, so that she used paper mache to create a new quote out of whole cloth, by selecting words I had said and parts of sentences I had said and Frankenstein combining them. So even that can be dangerous. But anyways, so first strategy is we respond, so at least that's on the record. It doesn't say, Prospera refused to comment or something. But then beyond that, we just go direct. So if you go to our news section on our website and our blog or follow us on X, we often will immediately publish something if we have there's a hit piece incoming or one was just published. Hey, here's some of the lies in this, right? So I've done this a few times as well. A few years ago, the MIT Tech Review one was a great example. They claimed a bunch of crazy stuff, not just for my quote that I had the video of, but they claimed some other things that we had video and photographic evidence was just blatantly false. So then we published the response to that and at least force them to change a few of the things. Now, what is frustrating about that is because we haven't been doing this direct strategy enough, I have no way to get to at all, the guy or gal who just reads MIT Tech Review and is not on X, for example, or is not going to go to our website and go see, well, have these guys responded? So that is still frustrating. But that's why it's important to grow that kind of native direct audience, which we're working on in a number of ways. And we'll continue to do so, and then continue to just tell our story directly and publicly. This is part of the reason I'm kind of, I don't know if we're going to do this yet, to be clear. I'm not announcing anything, but I'm hoping I can talk the team into doing a podcast, some YouTube video series, etc. Because I think look, we should just tell the whole story with some well-produced YouTube videos and do a giant podcast series on how did Prospera start? What's the actual, just sit down with Eric and Gabe and Titus and everybody and let's tell the whole story start to finish, publish the whole thing. It'll be a multi-hour podcast series. Let's do some YouTube videos of it, the whole 9 yards, and then continue doing so, talking about stuff going on in the jurisdiction so people can just see with their own eyes directly exactly what's going on and start building that kind of direct audience. I want to put some more energy into that in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've got, I don't know whether you remember, I started this podcast in Prospera. And on my first 7 or 8 interviews were with various people in Prospera.
That's awesome.
You weren't there at the time, but we came over, that was 3 years ago. And I've done everyone, pretty much everyone. Gabe, I haven't done. Yeah, I've done a lot of the people involved in Prospera. But what I think is a good idea for Prospera is what Bitcoin Beach did. Bitcoin Beach.
Of course, in El Salvador.
Bitcoin Beach have a podcast studio at Bitcoin Beach because so many people come there. But that's the same as Prospera. So many people come to Prospera. So you've got the problem I find with good quality podcasts is you need to do it in person. Like this, what we're doing here now is you can't compete with this online. So it's either the way I do it, which is relatively expensive, and I have to do periods of time. Like here, I'm doing 20 interviews, and then I'll use them over the next few months. And it's probably the most cost-effective way to do it, but it's not ideal because you can't do newsy things. Really, you can, but then it's just you have to juggle things around a bit. But if you're the place where everyone comes, and I think Prospera is becoming that. I mean, you've got a massive rota of events now, our own included. I mean, we've announced it now. The Free Cities Conference will be in Prospera next year.
Super excited.
I know,
about that.
Me too. I am so excited, and this is, so you've got this group of people coming through. So all you have to do is make one room, make it into a studio, and just anyone who's coming, just get them in the studio for like an hour. And, because the Bitcoin Beach podcast is really good. It's doing really well. It's run by the guy, the American guy, what's his name, who actually kind of came up with the whole project in the beginning. And it's a lovely studio, But that would be a brilliant idea, I think.
That's a great idea. I'm going to...
Well, you do have so many people coming through. Like, how often are you having events now?
There's multiple a month now.
Yeah, right. Okay, so... I mean, and when you have an event, you're getting all people connected with the space.
That's exactly right.
I mean, actually, I probably shouldn't be telling you to do this. You're going to be a direct rival to me, but I will do it better. Don't worry.
There you go. That's exactly right.
No, but I think if I was, I've often said to people, if I didn't have a family, I'd be in Prospera running the podcast out there, 100%, because I would have to be living in a free city.
Oh, yeah.
I would have to be. I can't at the moment because of just my situation in life. But I would be running it there, and I would be making forays to other places as well to cover different projects. But I would be running it from there. It would 100% be that. So what's new up there? I saw a bit of your presentation. I had to leave halfway through, but you were kind of commenting on all the latest things.
Yes, and in fact, after that, I messaged a few members of the team to just be like, hey, give me some more, we've done a lot this year, and I can't just remember it all off the top of my head. Give me some more of the interesting things that, have happened recently, basically. So, I talked about here the groundbreaking for the Nomad Nation Village project.
Oh, that was cool.
Darien Village project. So those are two different real estate projects going on right now.
So Nomad Village is going to be a sort of digi-nomad specific place. It's going to be geared for them. It's going to have co-working spaces and like cheap accommodation.
That's right.
That's so cool, man.
That's right. It's going to be It's going to be awesome. And then Darien Village, which is another real estate developer, is building a cluster of initially 5, and then it's scalable up to as big as they can raise the capital to build, basically.
Why is it called Darien Village?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
Is that Darian?
Darien.
And that's not the company that's doing it, is it?
No.
I wonder
it's a partnership with a few kind of entrepreneurs and real estate developers.
And has it got its own slant, or is it just places to live?
Yeah, it's places to live. Now what they're trying to do is make like little kind of micro hubs. So the way they arrange the initial 5, and then they'll try to replicate this, elsewhere as they expand, is built in such a way that it increases the kind of surface area for like serendipity, basically. So there's like a central kind of hub park node area. And to get from building to building, you need to walk through this area. So there's a higher likelihood you're going to kind of run into people. They'll have some commercial space on the lower floors to have little cafe shops, things like that.
So it's very experimental architecture kind of thing.
Yeah. It's not even experimental. It's taking what we know works from urbanism in places that have some of the best urbanism in the world. Like Barcelona is one of my favorite examples. They're walkable super blocks, they're called. That kind of increase this density in a way that is not off-putting and kind of rough like Manhattan, and is actually livable. So it's more along those lines. And I'm really excited about that one because of how scalable it is. Like once this initial one is successful, they can build a bunch more stuff. And then we've been doing some pop-up events. We've done them in New York City and Singapore and Stockholm. We'll get dozens to hundreds of people sometimes to show up at those that haven't heard about Prospera and wanted to learn more. We have both record number of both new company incorporations, record number of E-Residency Formations. We had our largest month ever, actually, like single month of new legal entities formed last month. So everything's accelerating pretty quickly.
Why is that then? What prompted that?
What's happening is, for whatever reason, and I find stuff generally snowballs like this in a way I don't really understand, but it's like once you reach some sort of inflection point, it just organically starts accelerating for reasons that aren't clear to basically any of us. I mean, we've improved eProspera drastically this year. It's much easier to use and more reliable, things like that. So, I mean, part of it is we made the process easier, but I don't have a solid explanation other than people are like, we're getting prominent enough, people are hearing about it. And that is, from the top of funnel down to people that actually end up doing it, it's just that top line number is increasing enough that the people that make it all the way through the funnel is increasing.
My observation is as well that the digital nomad community have noticed it recently in the last 6 months. And, Gonzalo Hord, I interviewed him in, where is it? In Morocco a few months ago. And he was on his way to see you guys and stuff. And I was surprised because I met him at a Nomad conference, and I was talking about free cities there, and no one knew anything about it. and no one knew anything about Prospera, and Gonzalo had only just heard about it, and you could see the cogs turning in his mind when I was speaking to him, saying, "Wait a minute, this is exactly what we want, what I want."
That's right.
And because and I think I underplayed the digital nomads in the past, because I think they're not a big group of people, but they're a little bit like, they're not, they do come at an important time, I think, and what they're also good at, I think, is focusing attention on a place, even if they don't necessarily stay and live there forever or whatever.
That's right. So yes, they are a good kind of market fit for what Prospera offers. And I'm glad they're kind of a bunch of more of them are coming. Obviously, I hope we eventually become like the #1 digital nomad hub in the world. But there's a catch there, which my friend Patry Friedman helped me kind of. He had this insight and walked me through, and I think he's right. Which is, if you're trying to build like a durable city with a durable permanent population, you get like a false positive signal from the digital nomads, potentially. Like, this hasn't happened empirically yet, but it's possible at least, which is you get a bunch of digital nomads coming in and out. You're like, oh, we're growing fast and look how many people are here. And then they move on to the next, they go to Lisbon or something next, right? Because a lot of them move in groups, and then they'll stay for a couple months somewhere and then go somewhere else, basically. So if your goal is, which ours is and many others, to have density of people that are there every single day, a density of actual like permanent residents, then they are not a perfect fit for that. Now, having said that, obviously, I welcome that group with kind of open arms. Like, I think that's a perfect fit for like kind of their entire ethos, of course. But you need both. Like, I want the digital nomads, and I want people that will actually like move full time, live full time. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the digital nomads coming in and doing cool stuff and spending time there, and they're doing so when they come, spending time with and making friends with the permanent residents.
I think that's the key point there. I remember a few years ago, speaking to people who are working at Prospera, saying, "No, we're not focusing too much on digital nomads because of these reasons." But the truth is, and what I realise now is, just invite everyone. Exactly. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, why would you limit that? Even if they do come and go, it doesn't matter.
It's exactly
you just
right.
want everyone there.
That's exactly right. You want as many people as possible. That's exactly right.
Yeah. That was Gonzalo taught me that as well. Yeah. He, they talk a lot about funnels. I don't know whether you've ever heard them give presentations about how many people come and how many people stay and make families and stuff. And they're according to them, at least, I say them, the digital nomads. Like they're one group of people. There is follow through.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. A subset of them just end up staying places. You're exactly right. It's another reason that we invite them and anyone else in. And then something else that I didn't talk about in the presentation because I didn't have time, but was super exciting and super cool. So we did a fashion show a month or two ago, somewhere in there. Miss Honduras was there, like all of the kind of leading, Honduran social media influencers and kind of fashion influencers were there. It was a roaring success. Everybody loved it. Some partnerships resulted with some, fashion schools in the region and in Honduras. And that resulted in a group of people wanting to start a fashion district in Prospera, basically, to start creating, a culture of that kind of innovative and artistic side of innovation through fashion, basically. So they're kind of working on that now, and some interesting kind of groups from all over the place are getting involved. There will be an event. They haven't announced it yet, so I won't go into detail. But there'll be a cool event related to this. It won't be in Prospera, but it'll be involving Prospera and pretty heavily. With some like major fashion brands early next year that a friend of mine is pulling together that I'm working on with him. So there's all sorts of cool kind of stuff like that in the works. So it's not just the kind of, air quotes, hardcore entrepreneurship as well. There's also kind of the culture making and the fashion things that have started moving more. We signed a sister city agreement with Stark City in the United States. So we have a sister city agreement. These are basically, they don't like do anything legally other than saying like, hey, we have, similar mindsets and populations, and we'd love to share like businesses and residents and have people go back and forth more or less.
Really? What's it called? Stark
City. It's a city in the U.S. It's either in Florida or Tennessee. The exact state is escaping my memory right now. So you do so the schools will do a swap with the students will come and see
stuff like that. Kind of stuff,
yeah. Stuff like that.
We used to twin towns. We used to call them.
Yeah, exactly the same concept. Right, exactly the same concept. That's exactly right. So yeah, we've had it's been a really good year. A lot of cool companies coming, and then we have some more interesting stuff coming. So I've been working on with some of the leading AI research and AI safety scholars to develop an AI agent statute. There's a problem in the AI space right now, which is the agents are finally getting capable enough to do kind of semi-autonomous things for you. But the problem is their legal status is super unclear, and no one wants to give them personhood, so we're not doing that for sure. There's, in fact, a bunch of U.S. states and the EU even have passed laws that explicitly say we will never give AIs personhood, like proactively. But because that's very philosophically complicated. But setting a liability and legal framework to allow people to actually do like what I call legally significant actions. Let an AI do legally significant actions on their behalf or the behalf of their company. Things like negotiate contracts, whatever the case may be, partnership agreements, whatever, moving or managing money. There's not a framework for that right now, so it's kind of unclear how those things should be handled. It's assumed some of them are just default illegal, and there's no place in the world where there's a legal framework where you can actually do this and experiment with deploying AI agents in this kind of more forward-thinking, semi-autonomous or fully autonomous way. So we're working on some enabling legislation to do that. Hopefully be done, Q1 of next year. I've been getting a bunch of really good feedback from some of the leading people in the AI world, and at places like the AI Law and Safety Institute and some other places. So we'll have that going on. I'm hoping at least to use that to then attract some of the attention of some of the frontier labs so they can do some of their more kind of agentic research within Prospera, actually, to be able to leverage the legal system to create legal entities and then, do interesting stuff, leveraging the AI agent statute.
What does that mean, agentic? You mean AI experimentation?
Experimentation is
whatever,
almost
like training. Or
yeah. So
but, people are just doing that on their servers, aren't they? Like, is it?
Yeah. The important piece here is the legally significant action part. So like, you don't need a piece of legislation to have Claude go organize your inbox or send an email for you or something, right? But right now, if, for example, let's say I have an AI agent that is negotiating supply contracts. Let's say I'm a company that buys things. Okay, I need some widgets. And I have an AI agent that is now my, supply logistics manager, for example. Like that's within the capability envelope of a lot of existing systems, and especially the near future systems. It for sure will be. There's no like legally clear rules right now on what happens if like my AI agent in negotiating with you defrauds you somehow, whether intentionally or unintentionally, right? It's just default, like my fault or my company's fault. And there's no way to kind of segregate these things. So while you could theoretically do it right now, it's at legal risk to you and your company. And so developing a reasonable framework around this that involves, requiring liability insurance if you're going to use these things at different levels depending on what they're doing, requiring bonding, right? So you have to post a bond basically. That means that, people that are harmed can get paid out immediately if they're harmed by the agent, things like that. The lack of clarity here is another key thing I've learned with Prospera, by the way. Regulatory clarity is as important as like the actual underlying meat of the regulation. There's no regulatory clarity here for anyone at all. So the default nature of businesses is like, well, if I don't have regulatory clarity, I'm just not going to do it. It's not worth it. It's too high risk unless you're in a very specific kind of field or type of entrepreneur. So this is meant to, at least what I'm working on, create that space where you have the legal clarity. Now you could try, something like a, supply management agent or something and see how it works, and know full well if things go awry, both you and your counterparty are completely like covered and insured either through an insurance company or through a bonded escrow.
Is there a quick and easy way to explain why they don't want to give personhood to AI agents?
Yeah, so part of it is emotional and part of it's philosophical. I've been very deep down this rabbit hole recently, so I'll try to keep this short. On the emotional side, people are extremely reticent to give any sort of artificial, like silicon-based, form of consciousness, effectively, personhood. It just emotionally feels wrong. Like, no, I am a human. I'm a biological being. Like, I am conscious. I have subjectivity. Like that cannot apply to like a different substrate. Like that there's just an emotional gut that feels wrong in some interesting, like just gut emotional sense that's hard to even put into words. And then on the philosophical side, you immediately run headlong into one of the largest unsolved problems in philosophy, which is called the hard problem of consciousness, which is, okay, like what does it mean to be a person, to be considered for legal purposes and for philosophical and ethical purposes, a person and have all of the rights and responsibilities and morals and ethical duties that come along with that. And that is not an easy question to answer. It's an easy question to answer when you just have humans to deal with as intelligent agentic actors. But now you will have artificial software, all right? You will have code that is intelligent, aware, and agentic. So answering that question of like, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to have the like ethical and moral duties that come along with having that designation. It runs headlong into just a thicket of philosophical problems. And the hard problem of consciousness is at the core of it all, which is, to put it in its most extreme form, it is by definition, like in principle, logically impossible to verify if another entity or being is conscious, okay? Because you could have what are called P-zombies, okay? So a P-zombie refers to, it's just ignore the name. It's
the
letter P. Yeah, probability zombies is what that refers to.
Right.
So you could theoretically have a world with P-zombies. So let me sketch out the thought experiment for you. This is the core of the hard problem of consciousness, basically. Assume you have me and then a perfect clone of me sitting next to me, except this clone is run by an AI, okay? The AI has, for whatever reason, we're going to make some assumptions, right? Has ingested all of the data about me, from the specifics of the state of my brain to my history and background and whatever. So it is perfectly like me in every single way, except you and I both know for an ironclad fact, it doesn't have a brain. There's a chip up there instead. Okay. There is, and it is not alive in like any definition of the commonsensical definition of alive and a person and conscious. No, it's just an algorithm, running some very complicated math, the result of which is it looks and acts exactly like me, right? It is impossible for you to be able to know for a fact, if both of us were sitting in front of you, which is which. It's completely impossible. So this really gets to the core of the hard problem of consciousness. It's impossible to verify in principle if another entity is conscious. Why? Because consciousness is subjectivity. It is that internal felt sense of a continuous stream of existence, right? That it is something to be you, is the way Sam Harris often describes this, right? The hard problem of consciousness. And that it is impossible for me to even verify that you're conscious. Now, obviously, I'm not saying you're not. The point is, like, I can't see, and it is impossible through any scientific measurement or otherwise for me to somehow externally, empirically validate that you have a subjectivity, that you experience qualia, that you have a continued felt sense of self, right? That is in principle impossible. So just asserting in a law that, AI are people, even if you can get over that emotional hump that I mentioned earlier, is like, all right, well, what does that mean? And how do we verify that? What is the difference between that and like the way Claude 4.5 works right now? What are the systems for that? How do we define it? Even just literally the definition of person in that sense is just so far completely unsolved philosophical problem. Obviously, there's a bunch of heated debate about this in the kind of academic philosophy world. But the knee-jerk reaction has been from legislators, basically, is like, we don't want to deal with this. We're just going to stop it before it becomes a thing.
I suppose the best way to test all that out is in the digital world, like avatars in the digital world, because that's much more simple. Like if I murder you in the digital world, if we are avatars, and am I committing some kind of a crime here?
Exactly.
I mean, am I?
But we can't ever know in principle. And the thing is, this is like really hard to do. So you would think, this is software. We can look at how it's code. We can look at how the code runs and at some point in there figure out kind of what makes you conscious. But then you run into the problem of like, we don't even know what makes humans conscious. We don't actually understand consciousness at a very fundamental level. There are serious theories in both philosophy and physics, actually, for what's called panpsychism, which is that like consciousness is like a substrate, the same way like gravity is a substrate, or like the space-time field is a substrate of reality. Maybe consciousness is a substrate of reality in some fundamental sense. We have no idea how this works, literally at all. We have a bunch of crazy ideas about it that are impossible to verify or test. I'm going to give you a perfect example of this. Literally yesterday, I was reading this paper that came out yesterday from Anthropic, which makes Claude, from their what's called the interpretability research team. So they they do research on, like how do these things actually work. And they have a tool where they can suppress the activation of specific parts of the neural network to suppress different kind of perceptions and concepts in the models. And so they found, fascinatingly, if you suppress the deception part of their neural network, so the part of their neural networks that we know for a fact is associated with the concept of deception and doing deception, then the model's claims about its own consciousness drastically increase by a gigantic margin. So decreasing deception, suppressing deception, in other words, forcing them to be honest in some very fundamental sense, drastically increases how often the model claims it is conscious, has subjectivity, like is aware, etc. We don't know what this means. Like I'm not, and to be clear, I'm not claiming Claude is conscious, right? But there's something there, and we don't even know what to do with that. Like, what do you do with that? The researchers themselves were like, here's the evidence. I'm not really sure what this means, to be honest. It's just a very odd space. So that's why when I first started doing this, I was like, oh, cool, we'll knock this out in like a week. This is super clear. And I started getting into it, and I was like, oh, God, this is one of the hardest unsolved problems in philosophy right now. I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole.
It's what I use AI for the most, actually, is especially if I'm declaring something philosophical, I always put it into ChatGPT and say, look, rip me apart, like tell me where I'm going wrong here. And I've ended up having some very interesting conversations with myself, essentially.
Yep.
And one of them ended up with me trying to understand how the AI was working stuff out. And because I'd read that there was a point that a lot of people kind of didn't really understand how they understand the algorithm, but they don't know why it was coming to some solutions. And the AI said to me, look, I said, well, so what are you good at that's unusual? And it said, well, I can say like red is to a strawberry as and then some completely weird and random, like, I don't know, I can't even think of the example it gave me, but it clicked. It was very good. And I think, interestingly, like, I'm quite good at that. Like, my own brain, like, if you tell me a bunch of stuff, my brain functions in a way that it thinks about other versions of that thing which are completely unrelated. Mm-hmm. And that's what the AI was good at, but didn't know why it was or how it was. Like, that's it. I was trying to work out whether it had any original thoughts. And I was trying to, because I, like, we were doing thought experiments. Me and the AI were doing thought experiments. And then I was Googling them to see if anyone had ever written or said this before. Yeah. And most of them, there was absolutely no record of any of this. And I'm saying, right, so are we getting any original thoughts here? And it explained to me, like, look, what I can do is I can take a concept that you understand, like I say, it wasn't red is to a strawberry. It was one thing is a function of something. So, movement is to a wheel, as a cushion is to and it would be the same kind of thing. It's very hard to explain what it was, and it was absolutely fascinating. And like the other day, I mean, I God knows where this thing's going, but I always fact check my own podcasts, like afterwards, because I end up talking about a lot of things over and over again. And I often recount experiences from my past, and I go back and I check them to make sure that I wasn't bullshitting, because you know how things are. Oh, yeah. And on this, the last episode that I put out was a very deep and philosophical one about spirituality and about hallucinogenic drugs and all kinds of stuff. And I talked about some mythological experience, some mythology from Indonesia. This is very random. There's a sort of deity called Nyai Loro Kidul, who lives in the South Seas of Java. Like, no one knows about this shit except like a few people and the whole population of Java, obviously, right? And the person I was talking to recounted something to do with ayahuasca and a deity involved with ayahuasca. And then I started talking about Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, because in the same way that I felt, hey, there's a connection here. And I told the AI this, and I said, is there a connection between any of these things? I mean, these are so random. One's from South America, one's from... And it came up and he said, yeah. He said, this is a very astute observation. And do you know what it ended with? It was amazing. It said, do you want me to write a poem about that? And I went, yes. And it wrote me a beautiful poem that wove all these mythological stories together. I mean, Jesus Christ.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
Where is this going?
Yeah.
Like what can I do with my life anymore? Like, what can I couldn't sit and write I mean, funnily enough, it wrote a kind of rhyming poem first, and I laughed and I said, come on, dude, write me something. Come on, I don't want rhyming poems. And then it did.
Yep.
It wrote something beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't understand what we're going to end up doing ourselves.
They're genuinely deeply intelligent. And what's even crazier than that is most people, I'm not speaking about you specifically here, but like most people don't even realize that even if you're on the Plus subscription for OpenAI, for example, for GPT, the default auto setting, okay, which is when you just open a new chat, just automatically on auto. What that actually does is it takes your query and it routes it to this thing called a router, which is a smaller model that then very quickly decides based on the content of your query, which other model to send it to. Now, this is a very clever way for OpenAI to save on inference costs, right? The cost of actually running the model, which is gigantic, because they can send very simple queries to GPT-5 Mini, which is a quantized, distilled version of GPT-5, and it's a much smaller model, cheaper to do inference. It's also much dumber, okay? It might send your query to the GPT-5 thinking low, which is like the lowest reasoning effort in the API, basically. But that's like the most you're going to get. But then if you put it on thinking, so it's in the drop-down menu when you select the model, it is you literally immediately gain like between 20 and 40 IQ points. And then if you're on the Pro subscription, you can set thinking to different levels. I am too, because I use it for work all the time. It has massively increased my productivity. And then, so you can increase it there. And then GPT-5 Pro, which is the only, like, it is the absolute smartest model any of us, like, normal people that don't work inside of OpenAI have access to, is, like, phenomenal. It is genuinely the smartest, like, artificial thing we've ever cooked up. The smartest kind of artificial thing ever, basically. And it is regularly doing similar things. So, for example, a famous mathematician from, I think, Stanford, I can't remember, I have to go look up the tweet, but he was saying, I use GPT-5 Pro in when I'm coming up with papers all the time. He was like, now often, it's not like it's coming up with my ideas, but I will just pitch over the fence the idea I'm having about a particular mathematical concept that's novel. It's like he's breaking new ground in math. He'll have GPT formalize it into GPT-5 Pro, formalize it into a proof, explain the proof, etc. Said sometimes it'll get it wrong, sometimes it'll get it right. But there's been multiple times now where within a conversation like this with GPT-5 Pro, he and the AI together, in a very collaborative way, in a way that he has said himself he would have never come to by himself, will come up with a new novel proof or theorem that solves a longstanding problem in math. And he does this like regularly. It's how he writes all his papers now. Just this week, there was this person was struggling with a very niche medical issue that is unsolved in medicine today. And they threw it over the fence to GPT-5 Pro, said like, just think deeply about this. Give me anything that's off the wall that might work. This was a couple months ago when they did this. It proposed a novel treatment therapy and explained how it should work with an existing drug that could be applied in a different way in a different dosage for their particular problem. And a paper was published this week by some researchers that saw this a couple months ago, went and tried it, and it worked. It's a totally novel treatment that GPT-5 Pro just came up with de novo. DeepMind at Google has several specific models that have come up with all sorts of new stuff, and they've solved protein folding completely. They have some frontier math models. I am, like, at this point, probably 60% sure, based on some stuff, Demis, who's the founder and CEO of DeepMind, based on what he said publicly, they're either have solved or are very close to solving the Navier-Stokes equation, which it's one of the Millennium Challenge problems. So the Millennium Challenge problems are some of the largest, most important unsolved problems in math and physics. And they've been unsolved for centuries, like the entirety of human history, basically, once we found them. So Navier-Stokes in particular deals with, without boring people, it deals with fluid dynamics and fluid mechanics, okay? It's very hard to model fluid mechanics, whether that be like, aerodynamics, hydrodynamics, like how water flows through things, how air flows around things. It's next to impossible. We have equations that approximate it pretty well, which is why you can have, CGI and airplanes that work, that sort of stuff. But the second you actually deterministically solve it, once you solve the Navier-Stokes equation, we now have like perfect command and control of all fluid dynamics, which means suddenly problems that, for example, have kept us from fusion energy, right? So the reason like fusion reactors are very difficult and don't work yet is because getting the magnetic fields correct to contain the plasma that is in the core of a fusion reactor and have it be net positive, meaning it outputs more energy than it takes to start it, basically, is a direct fluid dynamic problem that is so complex the world's largest supercomputers cannot solve it today. If you have a solution to Navier-Stokes, it is like trivially easy. You just run it once and it's done. Problem solved completely, forever. Fusion energy suddenly becomes like, it goes from impossible to like, just build it next year. It's trivially easy. There's a bunch of similar problems like that. You solve superconductors immediately, and a bunch of other like core just sci-fi technological unlocks. And Demis has said publicly that all he said about it is, we'll have an announcement next year, but we've made great progress on some very vexing problems. And has mentioned Navier-Stokes a couple of times. So it's like, we'll change the world immediately. It unleashes a whole new class of literally sci-fi technologies, force fields, laser weapons, a bunch of stuff that we have like rudimentary, crappy versions of suddenly become like trivially easy to do. And they have an AI model that's doing it, that's solving these things.
I don't know. I can't believe it, really. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it, because I just know that it's better than me. And the way I'm using it at the moment is collaboratively, definitely. I use it to understand myself and to make sure that what I'm thinking, I use it to challenge myself. That's what I'm using it to do, right? But I'm getting a sense that at some point it's just going to be like, and what am I then?
Yeah.
What am I?
So let me get conspiratorial with you for a second. I think about this a lot because this is not a what I'm about to say, which is a speculative conspiracy, basically, is not a problem right now, but will, without a doubt, if you assume not even exponential, just linear AI progress will be a huge problem, which is the following. You eventually get to a point, at some point, whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 5 years from now, is irrelevant, where artificial general intelligence is better than the best humans at every possible thing, okay? Like literally everything. If you just play that forward a little bit, given kind of the current state of affairs, what that world looks like is a vast majority of the world's economic activity is controlled by and done by AI agents, models, and robots powered by whatever the first frontier AI lab is, or the first 2 or 3 frontier labs that'll probably happen simultaneously is the way these things have been working so far. Like a couple labs will figure it out at the exact same time. That's how every advance has happened so far.
Is there something in there?
There's a whole other thing about contemporaneous invention. If you ever, it's a sidebar, but if you ever look at the history of invention, like the light bulb, which Benjamin Franklin is often credited for inventing, was invented by 5 people at the same time around the world. Same thing happened with calculus. Wow. So when calculus was invented, several other people had discovered it at the same time. There's this weird thing that happens which
could indicate some kind of substrate of consciousness.
It ties back to that. That's exactly right. It's very odd. That is just an unsolved, it's just a pattern that we've noticed, and we don't know why it happens. But it's happening with AI too. So a couple of frontier labs will usually make an advance at the same time. So play that forward. Let's imagine it's 3. I'm picking a random number, but say it's OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, whatever. It doesn't matter which specific ones. Well, now all economic activity can be done by their models, which means they effectively control literally all economic activity. You've now, to put it in economics terms, you have substituted all labor for capital, all of it. Because what is AI? It is algorithms running on chips in data centers. So you have swapped 100% of labor for capital. That means those capital owners now control quite literally everything. Now, before we get to that point, it's not going to get to that point because this is going to cause completely unimaginable political and social strife, right? Because we are effectively irrelevant in almost every conceivable way at that point. We meaning humanity.
Sorry, can I just butt in? This obviously goes hand in hand with the price of. There's a physical implication of this: robots, machines, and the cost of them is trending to zero. And right, okay. This is all part of it. It's not just algorithms running.
Exactly. Well, so the algorithms running, which is the AIs, right, solve all of those problems. Like they design 1,000x more efficient chips. We push the cost of inference down to the physical limit. There's a physical limit to it, in physics, literally, of how little energy you can use to do a simple calculation, which is the root of it. So you get chips that are operating at the limit of physics, right? You get super materials and superconductors that bring the cost of energy for these things down orders of magnitude. You get effectively free infinite energy from fusion energy. All of these things are solved in fairly rapid order by this artificial superintelligence. So then you end up in this very bizarre world where 3 companies control literally everything, have more power than anyone else, have this caged, chained God, basically, that they can do anything with. It is a just completely incomprehensibly bizarre world we are headed toward. I cannot describe how weird it is. And this is actually, I think, the end state of capital. So I just finished reading this very esoteric work of philosophy on the plane on the way down here called The Machine Against God. Okay. Now, this guy, it's not a theological, it's pure philosophy. But his thesis is basically what I'm describing here is just the end state of capitalism. And he doesn't mean capitalism in a kind of the way we typically talk about it in political philosophy. What he's referring to is the dynamic process that was started at the point at which humans figured out we could trade things for value effectively. That summoned what he calls the machine, okay, as kind of a mimetic concept. And what the machine does is it maximizes something. Right now, what the machine is maximizing is very specifically like subjective felt dopamine per moment at the lowest cost possible, right? Because of that, you end up with a bunch of an acceleration toward things that we all agree we hate and sucks. Like my favorite punching bag example of this is how prevalent gambling is everywhere in everything now, right? But that's the machine at work. All of the incentives of every single part of everything is effectively summed up in this concept of the machine. Well, the end point of the machine, because what it does is it optimizes a particular function. The function that it's optimizing, that dopamine maximization effectively, well, the most efficient way to do that is by creating superintelligence that can then effectively solve all problems instantaneously, almost within a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of the time scale of the cosmos, right? And so you end up in this very bizarre world, and it's this process that we've all started completely unintentionally, that no one controls or directs. You can't even, no matter how hard you try. In fact, when you try to fight against it, it turns against you, right? This is why like people make money selling communist merchandise, right? That is the machine doing what it does, maximizing this subjective felt dopamine. So it even takes criticisms of itself and uses that to accelerate further, right? So you end up in a very bizarre world where the machine, which is synonymous in this example, in this kind of concept with ASI, it ends up in just a genuinely unseeable and incomprehensibly weird end state. I think about this a lot, taking it back to Prospera a little bit, just because I'm like, all right, well, if that's going to happen, crap, I need to make sure we build some AI data centers at least. I want to be part of the stack somewhere. I don't know. That's as far as I've gotten.
Doesn't that lead to in abundance, though? I mean, for us, I mean, what does the human experience look like in amongst all that, do you think?
Yeah, so you end up in a world where the Jetsons technology of like the replicator, like a machine where you can press a button. So in this world, basically, technological progress is our ability to like manipulate matter efficiently at a low energy cost. To oversimplify, well, that means if you just run that process out over time, doesn't matter what time scale, you eventually end up with the ability to arbitrarily manipulate matter, right? Which means like rearranging atoms into whatever formation you would like with an arbitrarily low energy cost, as low as is allowed by physics, basically. So this is the world of what some people call post-scarcity or superabundance. Like there literally is no material restriction on anything anymore. But then literally what does a human do with their day? So we're assuming aligned AI because so far all evidence suggests that for some reason, I'm a Christian, so divine intervention, God's hand, something, the AI is just aligned by default. I don't know. But because it is aligned by default, I'm assuming alignment for this, right? I'm not assuming the doomsday scenario, basically, because that's much worse. So assuming humans exist in this world, we have superabundance, right? Because the AI is aligned. Well, then you have the crisis of meaning and purpose that we currently have. That affects everyone all the time simultaneously, because now there's nothing like productive you can contribute to that the artificial superintelligence cannot do better. By definition. And this covers everything from art to social organizing to cultural innovation to obviously like physical, technological innovation, literally all of it. So you will never want for anything. You can live more lavishly than if you had $500 billion today, far more lavishly because of this. And then what? Like literally, what do you do with your day and your time? What do you do?
Well, everything becomes meaningless because everything is available to everyone at all times, so there's no meaning.
Exactly. It is a completely bizarre world, and humans are good at inventing meaning. Is the thing, but
we'll restrict ourselves though.
That's what I think.
That will be the result. We'll put restrictions on ourselves. Like, I'll give you an example. Because that already happens everywhere at all times. Like I used to, before I sort of dived deep first into this, I used to run extreme expeditions to very remote locations.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Oh, I've done all kinds of weird things. I've spent 10 years migrating with the same nomadic family across the Altai Mountains every year.
I need a documentary on your life, dude.
Well, look, anyway, whatever. But I learned a lot about humans and people and myself from a lot of those things. And one of them was why, for example, in that case, we used to walk for 5 days. We used to walk 150 kilometers across the Altai Mountains with 1,000 animals and all these nomads. Bitterly cold, minus 35. You're basically putting yourself through hell. Now, why would you do that? Like, why would you do that when society's kind of like trending towards convenience? Like, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make our lives convenient. We've always got a bottle of water. We've got a comfortable seat. And that's the same thing. There's something quite primordial about us that needs a challenge, that needs discomfort. We have too much comfort. So we artificially create discomfort for ourselves, and when you walk across the mountains for 5 days and it's ridiculous and hard and blah blah blah. So the same thing will happen here. We will artificially create meaning for ourselves by restricting what we can. Hopefully it will be ourselves doing it. I mean, because if someone else is doing it, that's basically communism, 20.0 or whatever.
Exactly.
The worst. I mean, it is easy to see AI as very communistic when you look at it.
Oh yeah.
It's a kind of, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
It's the ultimate centralization. No, so the solution is cultural innovation. You're exactly right. Like the optimistic case here is like historically we've solved these problems through cultural innovation, coming up with new cultural norms and ways of being that solve these kind of problems of meaning and purpose. Given enough time, we eventually will like kind of figure it out and find ways to create that meaning and purpose for ourselves effectively. It's just I think it's true, but it's an unsatisfying answer. Insofar as I'm just saying like, we'll figure it out. It'll be fine. Like, we'll figure it out somehow.
But that is what it feels like. Mm-hmm. I mean, I am optimistic.
Oh, me too.
Like, I've never really planned that much for the future of things like that. I would rather be standing in front of it and go, right, now what?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure we'll come up with something. Because for example, one of the other things you can question is, who cares? Like, if I want to go out and garden for myself, why do I care that an AI can do it better than me?
Right.
Like, really? It doesn't matter. Yeah, an AI could do it better than me. But then if an AI did it better, if I instruct an AI to garden for me, to create flowers and plants and food, then I'll sit on my ass and do nothing. So I may as well just go out and do the proof of work. I mean, I may as well do it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, have to have a lot of, but that's it. It comes down to you have to be quite committed to the human experience.
That's right.
You really have to do that.
That's right. I have a perfect example of this from my own life. So I love cars, fast cars specifically. I love sports cars. I love them so much.
Have you got one?
Yes. So
have you got some?
Just one. Just one. I don't. Yeah, Prospera doesn't pay that well. I wish. No, I have one. It's not a super expensive one. So I have a 2020 Shelby GT350 Mustang. So it is a very fun car. It's the only car Ford ever made with a flat plane crank engine, which for those of you that are not gearheads just means it redlines around like a little over 9,000 RPMs, which means it can sound at the high end like a Ferrari or Lamborghini. That's how they kind of scream. It's because they're flat plane crank engines that can redline much higher than your normal cross plane crank, crankshaft driven engine that will redline at like 5,700 or 6,000 or something like that. Very cool car, a very unique car. They only made it for like 4 years. I love it to death. But it's not the fastest car that you could buy, even for the same amount of money. Never mind if you wanted to spend some more money. Like even for that year, never mind for today, In fact, all of the new faster cars, including the new faster Mustangs, the new Corvettes, of course, the new, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, the Koenigseggs, et cetera, they all have what are called dual clutch transmissions, which shift faster than any human could ever possibly shift. And they shift at the perfect time every time. You almost like audibly can't even hear it shift. It just moves. It's measured in milliseconds. It's absurd. But I intentionally bought a car with a 6-speed manual transmission because I didn't want that. And I didn't want all of the other, there's a bunch of new computer aided systems where like a bunch of the new cars and hypercars pioneered this, and now it's trickled down to stuff like Corvettes. They have drive modes you can put them in where like for the Corvette, for example, literally if you're taking it for a track day at Road Atlanta, you can put the thing in Road Atlanta track mode, and the computer knows the exact like millimeter by millimeter layout of the track and will dynamically adjust your like steering input, understeer.
Bullshit.
It's absurd. It's absurd. So it basically does it for you. Yeah. Like you don't have to do almost anything. Yeah. So I intentionally bought what they call in the community a driver's car that doesn't have any of those like technological things. It is a classic like with a clutch pedal 6-speed manual transmission because I wanted that experience, that like visceral experience of driving the car myself. It's harder, it's slower. Like I'm going to be slower around the track or whatever than some of these modern cars that have all the bells and whistles and the computer aided driving. But I would rather do that because it is a more visceral human experience. It is much more fun. It is much more challenging. It has a much steeper learning curve. And I'm actively choosing to do that. Like for the same money, I could have bought one of these other things that, drives for you basically, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted that felt visceral human experience. I think you put it quite well with human experience of doing that. So I think that is the long-term solution to these things. My only fear is with my kind of conspiracy about the capital all accumulating to these couple companies is once this happens, like there's in my mind, like this could play out a bunch of ways, but I think of it in two big buckets. One bucket is like that this process just kind of happens, and somehow we're able to navigate it such that, we get post-scarcity. It doesn't matter that these 2 or 3 companies own everything. Who cares? Because like literally material scarcity is solved for everyone simultaneously. That's effectively utopia, heaven on earth kind of case. But there's another way this goes, which is along the path at some point, when they just rapidly start replacing most labor with capital, most labor with AI automation, you get massive political and social unrest, massive like global scale violence, and we basically blow ourselves up before we can get there. Somebody gets unrestricted access to one of these models. They immediately invent a biological weapon that is uncurable, that it can attack the human genome and like kills everyone simultaneously and is impossible to stop the spread of, as just one example of the existential risks at play here among many. So I hope we don't go down that path.
I think we will actually find another way to challenge ourselves. I was just thinking it through there. I mean, if you look from purely a capital perspective, or from like a consumer perspective, 100 years ago, you might aspire to have something that now is completely abundant. But we find other things to aspire to, and there'll be a point in the not too distant future when billionaires won't have that much access to different things than anyone.
Elon Musk has the same phone you do.
Right. Now, at that point, there will be other things, and it may be spiritual. It may be something. I mean, like often you see that with wealthy people, status then becomes something they go for. They want a hospital named after them. They don't necessarily want a thing. It's the name on the hospital. It's an abstract version of something, and there will be many more things like that.
That's exactly right.
But the spiritual aspect, you imagine the spiritual path.
Oh, yeah.
Like people might just, once all that crap becomes meaningless, what are you going to focus on? You're probably going to focus on spirituality.
Exactly.
And that is probably an infinite thing. And in a way, if what we understand about consciousness is correct, the AI actually won't be able to compete with us on that level. It might be able to mimic us, but it almost might be that we are the tip of the wedge, because it can't think it can't think in a novel thought. It can't experience a novel experience. It can only mimic us. I don't know. Whereas we might have this kind of divine, you could call it, power to have novel experiences. I don't really know. I mean, it's a lovely thought experiment. I'm going to take that one away.
It's so hard because it is like in principle logically unprovable too, because of that P-zombie problem, right? So we will literally never know.
Trey, look, I've got to stop. I want to carry this on, but in 5 minutes, Mikkel is going to ring me on my phone. That was a that was a beautiful conversation. I really love to carry that on. I can see that we've got a lot further to go.
Oh yeah, I would love to keep talking to you about anything and everything. This has been a blast.
This is going to be a funny one to sell. This one, it started as Prospera and ended with like
consciousness.
Yeah. But thanks for coming in. And yeah, like when we come down to Prospera, we'll do a proper thought experiment. We just go off on a weird one and just see where it takes us. They're my favorite kind of conversations, but I literally, because I have a really tight schedule here. So.
Sure, absolutely.
But many thanks for coming in and sharing your wisdom, and that, yeah, thanks for that, because I love thought experiments, and that's a new one for me. So many thanks.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. This was a blast. I look forward to doing this again next year. We should both get there a couple of days early, and we'll just block off a bunch of time and just go after it. It'll be so fun.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you.